Thomas here with Much Props. Going to give you another how-to video. It's another Fallout build. I started watching the series and got really into it. Then that in turn made me go back to playing Fallout 4 once again, and I got really inspired. There's a lot of awesome stuff in the game and in the TV series that I will definitely be building in the next couple of months. But there's one thing that I was kind of drawn to as I was playing through. I hit Far Harbor, which is a part of Fallout 4, and in it there's a lot of aquatic type things related to it, one of which are these big, creepy, irradiated horseshoe crab type creatures called Mirelurks, and I wanted to build something that would pay tribute to it. So when you catch something, like a lot of people like to mount those items and put them on a wall, and in Fallout 4 you can mount Mirelurk claws. And I thought, let's make a giant irradiated Mirelurk claw decoration. It's gonna be pretty cool. Let's get to building. Starting off this build, I just want to point out you could always just print out the object to scale to make it easier for yourself. But here on the channel, I like to challenge myself most of the time and draw my patterns by hand. So after being told by my wife to keep it under 24 inches if I intend to sell it, I'm going to make it roughly 22 inches wide. No real rhyme or reason or trying to scale it to actual size. I'm just winging it. I rough it out in pencil, then trace that with a Sharpie and make marks for where I'm going to add other details later. My pattern is free and downloadable in the description or on my website at www.muchpropstudios.com. Since this is another Fallout build, I thought it would be fun to catch back up with our own prop maker vault dwellers story that I've been kind of making up as I go over the past couple of videos. Hope you enjoy the build and the story. Last time we heard from our vault dwellers, they stopped two imposters in the settlement known as Good Neighbor. After bidding everyone farewell, our two vault Much Props dwellers can check off a couple of names off their binder of pretenders. One of the Good Neighbor residents said he heard from a cousin up in Far Harbor that something fishy was going on. The vault dwellers, after years of canned and powdered food, were in the mood for some fresh seafood. So off the two went in search of yet another enclave implant trying to take over the Commonwealth. They hopped a boat off of the Nakano family in the north and took the short ride to the creepy island of Far Harbor. Those of you history buffs may know it as Bar Harbor back before the Great War. Now I traced the whole template onto a piece of 48mm EVA foam. You could stack up 10mm foam if you can't find this thickness of stuff, or even make it out of something like foam that's used for insulation. Anyway, trace and cut it out with a sharp box cutter. This foam is almost as thick as the fog that our two prop makers passed through on the creepy waters to Far Harbor. As the boat autopilot navigates to their destination, they take in the eerie fog that has engulfed the island, the strong smell of fish and musk, and the crackling sound of Mirelurks and other formidable creatures native to the waterfronts around the area. Now I'm going to cut off the three sections of the arm labeled top, bottom, and forearm. These get traced onto some 10mm foam cut out and contact cemented to the big block I previously cut out. The boat slowly pulls up to the rotting pier of Far Harbor, and the vault dwellers no sooner put a foot on the dock before they are greeted by several locals. A silver-haired woman introduces herself as Captain Avery and begins to question the new visitors about their purpose for visiting the secluded island. Not wanting to give too much away to the potential Enclave spies listening within the crowd, one speaks up and states that they are there to try the local seafood. They name-dropped the Good Neighbor resident and said that their cousin Mitch was suggested as a point of contact to the island. Before I put all the pieces on, I carve back a little bit of detail into the between parts now, since it'll be easier to reach before the glue up. After letting the contact simmer for a few minutes, I then tack it to the base. Back to the story. Captain Avery points out that they can find Mitch at the local bar known as the Last Plank. She also sternly warns the two to be on their best behavior, as they are visitors in a very hostile time of year in Far Harbor. Not thinking much about it, the two head to the bar to have a chat with Mitch and figure out what all the local issues are. The entire town seems to be on edge, with hands closely guarded to a weapon and jumping at every creak that the spooky dock city lets out through the dense fog. Now time for carving. Please be careful while cutting through thick materials like this, especially with glue up in it. The blade will grip differently as it passes through that seam, and you could easily cut yourself. I know it looks like I'm moving fast, but this video is sped up over 5 times its actual speed. Pay attention to the blade and where both hands are at all times. I just look at my image and do my best to shape it as close as I can to the reference. As the vault dwellers enter the muggy, damp pier establishment, they sweep the room visually to see who all is within. Other than the bartender and a waitress mopping an endlessly dirty floor, the bar is completely empty. They casually walk up to the bar and ask the barkeep where they can find Mitch. With a 1950s greaser look, he combs back his pompadour haircut and says, "I'm Mitch, who's asking?" Now that all the bulk of the foam is cut back, I can start shaping it closer to my reference image using a rotary tool. I try my best to make the edges rounded off and at the same time eliminate any areas that are too flat. I add dips and crevices all over the build. I have a mount in the game that I refer back to from time to time to help me get it close to what I want. Make sure if you're sanding foam to wear a respirator and work in a well ventilated area, you don't want to breathe in the dust. After Mitch's alpha male demonstration in front of absolutely no one, the vault dwellers explain who they are, and before Mitch can respond, a loud town alarm goes off. Screams can be heard outside, quickly followed by gunfire. The waitress quickly bars the door, and Mitch pulls out a shotgun behind the bar, lifts it up past the two visitors, and points it directly at the barred door. In my drawing, you can see this ridge of partial lumps. The Mirelurks have these ridges that run along the forearm down through the bottom part of the claw. There's also a small little trail that leads up to the top. I shape bits of my cutoff pieces to make these lumps that I then glue into those spots and sand them relatively as best I can to blend it all in. Back in the bar, Mitch tries his best to stay calm as he explains to his new patrons that Far Harbor has been harassed for the past couple of years by Mirelurks wandering into the pier. They break into houses, destroy property, and walk off with food and random parts, which is kind of weird for Mirelurks. Mitch also explains that the weirder thing about the attacks is that the smallest Mirelurk seems to be the leader of the cast. In most animal populations, the largest seems to be the dominant, but not in this case. I didn't smooth out any of the sanding bits here because I want this cloth to have some texture, but I do need to hide the seams of that gray foam a bit, so I dab on some Mod Podge, laying it on pretty heavy to build up and hide those transitions. As Mitch educates the confined group on the practice of mutated species, the two vault dwellers clear a spot on a nearby table, slam down their binder of pretenders, and quickly thumb through the pages. They remember getting a strange costume request several years back for a Mirelurk suit. It was one of their biggest cosplays, standing at over 7.5 feet tall. It was a masterpiece. They even equipped the costume with scent gland pouches and a voice modulator that could disguise the speech of the wearer into scratchy sounds like a Mirelurk makes. Now 2 coats of Plasti Dip to unify the color and give me a base for spray paint. Then I did a mixture of various spray paints outside to give me a good starting point for the paint job. To create a similar color gradient and variation to my paint job, I'm going to now sponge on various colors to brighten the claw up in places and darken it in others. I use orange, yellow, and white to lighten, and blue partially mixed with some red to darken in areas. If you mess up or need to thin down the layer, just hit it with a paper towel while the paint is still wet. As for our story, Mitch shifts his eyes back and sees the image of the Mirelurk in the binder and quickly yells, "How do you have a picture of that stupid bipedal mutant?" The Vault Dwellers explain that the Mirelurk leader is nothing more than an Enclave spy in a costume. Mitch, with his jaw on the floor, can't believe what they are telling him. They then explain how the scent glands on the back of the costume must be confusing the real Mirelurks the imposter is leading. Now I paint the gap black with some acrylic paint and give it a little bit of gray highlights on the folds. Back in the bar, the waitress still close by the door squeals, "I can see the Mirelurks! They're going towards the bait shop!" Thinking quickly, one of the Vault Dwellers asks to see Mitch's shotgun. With the back exposed on the Mirelurk, we can get a clean spread out shot of the costume to hit both the scent gland packs and the battery pack to the voice modulator. Mitch agrees, and our Vault Much Prop squad springs into action. On the count of 3, swing the door open and we can take the shot. 1, 2, 3. The old wood door flings open as the foggy mist and smells of the beast hit our heroes. The prop maker aims at the smallest Mirelurk and pulls the trigger. The shot echoes through the buildings on the dock, and instead of the typical hiss of a Mirelurk, a very human yell sounds out in pain. Almost immediately, the other Mirelurks turn and rip the little former leader to shreds, then quickly scurry off the pier. I covered the claw in Mod Podge and let it dry. Now I'm going to add some washes to darken up the cracks just a little bit and bring out all those details. Once finished, I hit it with another layer of Mod Podge to add back the shine. And with that, I'm pretty much done. As far as Far Harbor is concerned, it all pretty much took care of itself. They gathered up the parts of the costume and put it in the tank in the center of town to be a warning to the Enclave, along with a toxic Vault Boy sticker on the glass. Our vault dwellers asked to keep the left claw as a memento of their trip to get some fresh seafood from the Foggy Island port. The townspeople agreed, and after a traditional Far Harbor seafood party, the two set off back to the mainland to continue their journey of righting their cosplay making mistakes. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty awesome. Definitely something that will be hanging on my wall for years to come. Now, I definitely think this could be something that is mounted like an actual animal mount may be done, or it could just be left to be put on display or creepily reach out and grab somebody. But yeah. Not too difficult, a lot of just kind of sculpting in order to get the shape that I wanted, but it's all EVA foam. And because I use that really thick stuff, there's no support wires or anything needed, which is always nice. But yeah, I'm really psyched about the paint job. I think I did pretty good. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to pull something from your favorite video game of all times and put it into the real world, and then just kind of, yeah, you don't want to mess with a crab that size. Maybe you'll get some.
Yay!
And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. I'm going to go tell a bunch of fishing stories about how I caught a crab this big. Peace out. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.